All right, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Zoning Review Committee meeting of August the 13th, 2024. Um, we have somewhat of a good agenda tonight, so let's open the meeting. And first thing on the agenda is reviewing of minutes from June 11th, 2024. There's
I
Larry.
move that we approve the minutes as posted.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Beautiful. All right. Next on the agenda is discuss updates on the sign bylaw and review parcels along Route 3. So let's start with Bob. Why don't you take it for a run here and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. I shouldn't say welcome. It's not my meeting. I should say hello to everybody. Um, so the draft you have is based on our conversations in June with, again, some questions for the committee, but the major things that were added was text for the electronic message center signs based on conversations that the committee had. And that's all shown in red line in the table of the sign table. New language in the definition section on gasoline signs, something that you discussed last time. So we added that. And then the other issue that came up was the building with two street, quote unquote, two street frontages, the building at the corner. So I added some language in the on page 6 of the bylaw on the tables. And then the only other issue is on page 2 in the general provisions, there's references to state building code sections, which I think have been in your bylaw for a very long time, and I actually couldn't find these sections. And so I have no idea where in the state building code these two paragraphs, C1 and C2, are trying to refer to. So I asked in my questions for the zoning committee if perhaps the building commissioner could figure that out and let me know what sections to put in here, because these apparently are not the correct sections anymore.
Colin, do you have any comment on that?
I do not. I can follow up with Paul. Welcome.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
I did a quick look earlier. It looks like those are references back to 1997, what the state building code was, that the state code was still out there from 1997. I don't know when it changed, and I don't know what it should be referring to now, but it does look like it's been in there for a while, and it changed at some point, and we didn't change the bylaws, which not surprising, I guess. But at some point I can put it in the chat where I found the 1997 reference, but ultimately we should get it to whatever it is today.
Is that something that we think that our building inspector would have, or do we need to get a hold of our town council for that?
Yeah, we should be able to dig, Mr. Chair, we should be able to dig that up. I was just searching and it was the 5th edition back then in 97. Right now we're going to be moving on to the 9th edition. Well, we are in the 9th edition now. So it should be easy to go back and reference that section and see what it really is. I can probably do it pretty quick.
I'm sure that our building commissioner can give it to me first thing tomorrow morning, very easily.
Okay. Well, let's have that happen then, and we can get that information over to Bob so we can update this section then.
Or another way of looking at it would be to have a statement of all pertinent and current state building codes as applicable at the date of permit or permit request. I know that's not clearly defining it, but it will hopefully, with due diligence on the building department's part, they would have the most up to date, and we would be okay with it.
Yep.
So I don't know.
Okay. Bob, you had some other questions too that sort of were at the beginning of um, the section that you would put the charts together for. You want to go over those right now with us?
Okay, right. So the first question is related to the issue of the building with the two walls facing two quote unquote streets. Is the extra, just, just a general, how do you want to allow the extra sign, by right or by a special permit? So that's the decision of the town.
Joe, you're the one who really kind of would be dealing with that. What are your thoughts?
That's a good question, by right or a special permit. I can see a number of instances in a city atmosphere where a building would be right on the corner. It would have a sign on each street. It's almost a given that it would be unusual if you only had one sign on one street. You know what I mean?
And we also had discussed, like at the plaza where the restaurant is on Middlesex, having a sign on Middlesex and then also a sign on the plaza's entrance too.
Yes, we agreed to approve that.
Yes.
That was there prior to the prior ownership also, I believe, going back.
When it was the Outback.
It was the Outback going back, yeah. So I would say that I don't know if there should be like a special clause for buildings on a corner of two public thoroughfares. Maybe they're within a certain proximity of those two thoroughfares. They could be either right up on the sidewalk, like in a city atmosphere, or maybe back 100 feet. I don't know.
I think the question really is, do we want it by right or do we want it by special permit?
I think it would probably be by right, by permit, not special permit, but by them taking out the permit, they would be take advantage of the fact that they're on a corner and that they could get two signs.
I would be in favor of that as well. Anybody else in the committee have any thoughts?
Would there be situations where you would not want that? I'm just saying, because it's one of those things, if it's by right, you don't have any say anymore. So, will there be situations where you're now going to have a proliferation of signs that is not desirable? I don't know. I haven't seen all the ones that have come before the ZBA, so I don't know the answer. But are there any situations where, because I imagine this doesn't happen that often for us, so it's not like you're going to be inundated with lots of requests like this, but what are the downsides to that? Because then
well,
you're not
that's a good
say.
point. You're not really allowing all of the off-premise or the signboard or the freestanding. This would be pertaining to the equivalent of the original sign that would be on the front of the building. You would be allowed two of the same, and those are the ones that are mounted on the building. It's not like we're going to have two stanchions, one on one street, one on the other, with signboards. Yep. This is only pertaining to the one that's on
On the buildings.
The recent cases that come to mind are the ones that are mounted to the building.
I mean, I just think it's one of those ones where once you make it by right, you no longer can say no. It doesn't mean that you couldn't say, hey, we're not going to reasonably withhold them. It's just, it's one of those things. But are there situations where we wouldn't want to have that type of thing? I mean, there aren't that many buildings that fall into that category, and certainly there aren't going to be that many that are on a corner. So,
And we do have the precedent.
okay. But even if you have the precedent, you can still say, yes, we allow it. It's when you want to say no that it's harder, and you won't have that choice to say no either. Moving forward, it's just going to be by right.
Mm-hmm.
So Eric, you think we should probably keep it as a special permit then?
No, I'm just asking the
Yeah.
question is, when we do these things by right, as we've gone through with a variety of other things, we no longer have say. That may be perfectly fine. That's where I was asking, Joe, because he's seen a lot more of these than I have. Are there situations where that could be a challenge? And it doesn't sound like
we've
there
not
are.
had, yeah, we haven't had a situation where that was the case.
Okay.
We've granted them when there was a need for it. A demonstrated, yeah, then where they literally didn't have any signage on one street. Yeah.
Bob, how about you? Bob?
Yeah, this is entirely, a decision of the town, but I appreciate the potential worry that Eric is expressing, but in fact, remember, the first sign, which is 100 square feet, is allowed by right, and it's been allowed by right in your bylaw for apparently a very long time. And so you have, as Joe mentioned, there's hardly any of the second signs ever been asked for, but you probably have over the years dozens and dozens and dozens of the first sign on the front. And if you're not having problems with that because they're by right, it's always a risk, but you're living with a much bigger risk by allowing the first sign by right.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a scenario that it could pop up because that's the first thing that popped into my mind too, Eric. It was trying to see like, well, what if it's abutting like a neighborhood like Old Ting Road or something like that, where you have a business on the front, you have a resident in the back. I mean, I guess that's a potential one that you don't know if you want it there, but I mean, I kind of leave it to the ownership of that parcel if they really want a sign that points out towards an area that really isn't activated. Areas that would likely come up, probably, I don't know, Joe, you have a comment on the ones that have popped up, is really the Outback situation or something that has frontage on Route 3. So it's an industrial parcel where let's say you're up off industrial, like over there on the Industrial Way, or I'm sorry, Progress Ave, something like that, where you have signage out towards Progress Ave and you want something to face out towards Route 3 in the back. So I don't know, it seems to me like those are probably more of the situations that it ends up popping out for. I don't have.
We've had the
Yeah, and I think I'm happy with those.
Yep, and we've had the convenience store next to Sullivan's Ice Cream. So he's trying to catch the traffic going up Westford Road and also in front of him on Middlesex.
Well, should we take a vote on this then, or how do we want to proceed as a committee?
I mean, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I am
think by
too.
right makes sense to me.
Yeah. I'm just, on a lot of these, I don't deal with it on a day-to-day basis. So I'm asking the questions so that I understand, but I'm deferring to the folks who do deal with it on a regular basis to say, is this something that we foresee is an issue? And it sounds like, nope, not a big deal. And, if we can make it easier, I'm for it.
All right, so it sounds like we agree that it could be by right. So Bob, you want to insert that language in there? Good. All right, and then you have I think you have what, 4 questions altogether, Bob? You want to go over those, the other 3 with us too, and we'll knock them off one by one?
Yeah. The second one has to do with, there was quite a bit of discussion on the issue of the holiday sign, the either, you know, it's kind of a combined category, business open or holiday decorated flag sign. And the question is, right now, and this is from your current bylaw, 1 sign per residence or per business in the various districts is allowed. And there was some conversation about, well, these could be 2 different signs, and likely would be. So should they be allowed 2 signs, a business open sign and a holiday sign, or just 1 sign and pick one? So, and this is in, you know, all your districts, just keep that in mind, residents and business and industrial districts. So I had lots of notes about conversation, but none of my notes indicated that there was a consensus one way or the other, but I'm not sure. So I thought I'd put a question here to see if your memory is better than my memory.
I don't recall exactly how we landed on this either, to be honest with you, Bob. I guess we'll push this back to Joe again and see what he has seen or would like to see, because signs fall under your jurisdiction. So what are your thoughts on this, Joe?
To be honest with you, I haven't really run into this one, so I really don't have that much of a comment. I know that it does say business open sign or holiday decorative flag sign. It doesn't mean that the holiday decorative flag sign could also say open on the same flag. So we're talking 1 flag. So they could have 1 flag for normal business open, you know, 10 months out of the year, and then the other 2 months leading up to a holiday season, they would have a holiday decorative flag that also says business open on it, you know. So we're still only talking 1 flag.
Okay.
So we're not specifying, for instance, the content on each flag. So, but we're still just saying 1 flag.
I'm fine with that. Anybody else have any comments?
I mean, I was fine with the 2. I didn't see any reason to be more burdensome for adding more in there. But I'll err on the side of the rest of the committee. I mean, I just didn't think it was that cumbersome to have 2, and if it hasn't been an issue so thus far, could be, I guess, the or could be eliminated. It could just be and. I don't.
So like, the one, for example, on Middlesex right now, I think Tremonte has a couple of flags, right? That say open as you're going through. Ones, they're not really attached to the building. They're the ones that go up on like posts. Is that, would we be restricting that? If it's just one, or is it just the ones that are attached to the building?
I think it's either attached to the building or freestanding. If it's a flag, it's a flag. Right. So we're only allowing 1, depending on, you know, whether it's business open or it's a holiday decorative sign. But like I said, the holiday decorative sign could also say open, but we're only allowing 1. So if he has a flag on the building that says open, then he has another one. Like sometimes they have those ones that are actually air powered, whatever. That would be considered a flag. So he would only be limited to 1.
So we do have those ones that are sort of by the pizza place. I think it's what, 244 or whatever is Middlesex, that have those
266, yeah.
266. They have 2 open signs there. Is that actually breaking the bylaw at this point?
If he's got two signs attached to the building that's both say open.
No, they're not
I would
attached to the
say, I
building,
would
they're
say
on-
it breaks the bylaw.
They're in
I
the
would say
street.
it breaks the bylaw.
They're in the street. And I don't know that have we addressed street signs like that, Bob?
All you have right now, is language that, says very little, actually. It just says one, a business open or, I can't find it now, but, or, holiday decorative sign, and there's no permit needed, and it says one sign.
Well, these are flag signs. Yeah,
Flag-
they're flag signs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whether it's a business open flag sign or a holiday decorative flag sign, you're allowed one right now.
And yet 266 has two. If I'm reading this right. So then.
Yeah, it's like one of those signs that's held down by sandbags or something, and it just kind of
Yep.
swivels in the wind. It stands up. I think what they have, one that says open, one that says lobsters or something like that. Right? So does that lobsters and open, does that count as two there?
If it's two separate flags,
Yeah.
it's two. This is one of those sign regulations that in town after town, it's like, they put up open for this and, special grand opening here, and these kind of flags show up and disappear without really much of any enforcement in terms of what the bylaw actually says. So this
Well,
is.
do you want to increase this to 2 to 5 to 15? I mean, right?
Yeah, I think that's the hard part, right? You sit there and say, if we're not going to enforce it, then
Yeah.
why have it?
Yeah.
I don't think that we want 5 or 15. We don't want a proliferation of a lot of them, but it might be, given some of the examples that we've already seen that don't, they don't seem to be something that, causes problems or anything like that and raises.
We don't have anybody complaining about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I look at it. So maybe 1 is not enough. And maybe we look at it and say, you know what? 2, it seems reasonable. 5, way overkill.
Yeah.
So we sit there
Yeah.
and say,
Okay.
let's put 2 in there now. If we run into some challenges with that, we can adjust it. I doubt it, but I mean, if it's going to be in there, we need to make it enforceable. It's one of those things. If
Yeah.
you're not going to enforce it, why have it?
Why have it? Yep.
Well, the reason to have
No,
it
I agree.
is you want to have, even, it's one of those squishy things about whether they get enforced or not. But if somebody really wants to go hog wild and put 20 flags out there, then you got something to point at and say, this is the bylaw and you're in violation of the bylaw and we're going to enforce the bylaws. If you don't have anything in the bylaw.
Personally, I think 2 is reasonable. Personally, I think it's say, you have 1 on the building itself. You might have 1 out front. It's not obnoxious. It's not a distraction. It's not one of those things that you sit there and say, wow, that's a problem. So personally, I think 2 is better than just the 1.
Well, the nice thing about 2 is it pulls everybody that wasn't into compliance. It seems like they're now in compliance, because it seems like that's the number that people are gravitating towards. No one's had any issues with it. Kind of seems like the thing.
Yep. So why don't we change this? We can leave the business open or holiday decorative sign, and we'll just change it to 2 per residence or business. That way it could be one or the other or both, or we can have 2 opens or 2 decorative signs. But 2 would be the maximum of signs that we would want to allow.
Flags.
Sorry.
I was confused earlier too. And I'm like, okay, flags, got it.
Flags, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Okay. So if you can make that adjustment, that will answer that question, Bob.
I will do that. And then the third one is if you are allowing the EMC signs along the Route 3 corridor, do you want to restrict those to on-premise signs, which means they're only advertising something that's on the same property as the sign, or do you want to turn them into billboards that can advertise anything?
Is this by right or by permit? Because I'm looking at it by, I'm not a fan, I don't want a proliferation of billboards. I feel comfortable in that, and I think that we've got some mechanisms to deal with that, but would that then restrict us to not have any billboards? Or how do we address those types of situations?
It's a special permit as it's proposed.
Okay.
So whatever you choose would still require a special permit.
So at the time of permitting, can we say what kind of content that we want at that point, or do we need to spell that out up front?
So this is a tricky situation because of the Supreme Court case. You don't want to talk about content, but they allow for a distinction between an on-premise sign and an off-premise sign. And that basically is as simple as possible. The on-premise sign advertises for something that is quote unquote on-premise on that property, and an off-premise sign advertises for something that is commercial advertisement for a commercial use someplace else.
But we're still going to have those restrictions as either way. We're still going to have the restrictions as to how many, how much acreage there is, how close they are to certain other signs, all of that, right? Either way.
Correct.
Because I
Well,
look
we
at
can
it
read
and
it-
say, I'm
we can
sorry,
get
Joe,
it-
go ahead.
We can get a little more clearly defined also, because there are some parcels that go up to 200 acres. There are some parcels that are 5, right? So right now we have listed 10 acres as I see. Yeah, we do have the, thank you, Colin, for the listing. We could expand it to something like 50, you need 55 acres. I don't know if that sounds reasonable. It may be that we have something like a joint requirement where you have a minimum of 10 acres or more, but you have a certain number of linear feet located on Route 3. So even though you have a snippet of land, you have 50 acres, but you have a snippet that comes out to Route 3, you still wouldn't qualify because you don't have enough linear frontage on Route 3. So it can be a little more clearly defined. And we probably want to look at the acreage, so we have a lot of parcels that are over 10 acres. And, you know, just roughly, if you want to add them all up, they would constitute about another dozen signboards.
Yeah, and rethinking what I was talking about earlier, whether it's the on-premise or whether it's billboards. I don't want those big signs, whether they're a billboard, putting other people's content, or whether they're, it's a truck stop or whatever, you see those things. I don't want to have a proliferation of those.
I think we're all in agreement on that.
Yeah, so do we limit the number of billboard type signs that we would allow? And what is that number gonna be? We already have what, 3?
We have 1 fixed and we have 2 electronic.
So
Now, I don't know if the town can put an actual limit and say, yeah, we've got 5, or we're going to allow 5 or some number. I don't know if that's possible, or that would stand up in court, or if it was restrictive, like we were saying, the number of acres, the number of linear feet on Route 3. I think that might hold up better than just saying, yeah, we're only going to allow 3. The first 3 come and get it, or the first 5 come and get it, and you're all, and after that you can't.
Yeah, I agree with what Joe just said. You're on very shaky ground trying to justify limiting it to 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever is if they're all the properties were in the same zoning district, you have this uniformity clause in the state statute that every property has to be treated similar. So that's a problem. But the way to do it and the way other towns have done it and the way it's drafted is, as you've discussed in June, was, height limit, setback limits, separation limits. Those usually pass muster.
So I think we're good with the height and the size.
Yeah, I think that's the way we ought to go.
So really, we're just looking at at distance between signs then. Is there some sort of a standard that you've seen from other communities, Bob, that address that?
No, it's tends to be more community based on where the signs are going to be allowed. Like here, it's along Route 3, and it's usually along a major corridor, whether it's Route 3 south of Boston or 495 or whatever, and how the properties lay out. So it's not kind of a universal standard there.
So how many miles do we have on Route 3 as far as border goes? Is it 6 miles, I'm thinking maybe, or more than that?
I can find out. 1 second.
I guess we'd also really need to know how close the two that we have heading southbound are. And I don't know, is there any federal laws, Bob, about that would have something to do with maybe speed limit?
No,
Nothing with speed limit, okay.
no. I mean, the federal government, has rules about what speed limits the states can put on there, but it doesn't have anything to do with signs.
Being the old guy that I am, 65 on Route 3 being the new standard certainly seems rather quick trying to get it on and off. Especially trying to get on, because that right-hand lane seems to be the ultimate passing lane for everyone now. Don't get me started on that.
All right, you've got 3.6 miles on the whole stretch.
So if we limited it to, I mean, ultimately, how many miles, how many signs do we think would be appropriate? And do we limit it by saying 1 per every mile and a half, for example?
Well, this is kind of tricky because the properties are obviously not uniform going up Route 3 in terms of how big they are, or how wide they are, and everything else. Right now, I think this came from the Tewksbury bylaw, which you guys looked at in June. You have a separation of 1,500 feet. Yeah, 1,500 feet. Now, there's no magic numbers here. I mean, it would take, if you wanted to really figure this out, it would take somebody having to do a real study of every single property on both sides of Route 3. How much property, what's the width of the property, who owns the property, and then what would it look like if everybody got a sign and it was 1,500 feet apart, or if everybody got a sign and it was 1,000 feet apart, or if everybody got a sign and it was 2,500 feet apart. That's a lot of work. So a little bit of this is guesswork, but if, it's up to the town how you want to approach this, but.
I mean, just looking at the pieces of property that are there now, do we have any idea whether this opens it up to having a bunch more? Or, I mean, a lot of the property there is, owned by us or the Commonwealth. I think that there was 19, but I think it's actually 20 that are more than 10 acres. I think I just did a quick thing. I think if you do 20 acres, there's far fewer. I think there's 20 acres. Oops, I changed my formula here. If you do 20 acres, I think the number goes down to 9 as opposed to 20. So you're cutting the ones in half. I mean, I don't want to say no more signs, but I look at it and say, I think we've got 3 now, and I think the residents don't want to have a lot more. That's for sure. We don't want to be known as the billboard folks. That's the way I look at it. But obviously we have to do everything legally, and we have to make sure that we're, in compliance. So
if again, go back to my original question on this topic about on-premise and versus billboards, if you limited it to on-premise signs, you would have fewer signs and likely far fewer signs. If you open up the billboards, then everybody that owns property there thinks they've got $1 million opportunity to sell advertising for American Airlines or something, and that would produce more signs.
I mean,
yeah, that makes a great point. I think I'm definitely leaning more towards the on-premise to make more sense and limit it.
I mean, do we even need it for on-premise, I guess? Or, do we say we don't? I don't know. I'm just trying to look at it. Can we say that we don't want any more, right? Sit there and say we've already got the ones, we're closing a loophole, and we don't want to have either one. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, the simple answer is you can say that. You don't have to allow in your bylaw electronic message signs along Route 3.
So the ones that are there would be grandfathered in then, and that's that?
Well, that's a good question because they aren't allowed in your bylaw now, but they were permitted. And so I've never been clear under what part of the bylaw they've been permitted. Is there a specific part of the bylaw that allowed them to be permitted? Because if not, then they're not legal non-conforming, which raises a whole bunch of other issues.
Yeah, how were they permitted? I remember seeing one of them in front of us on the planning board to comment on, but I thought it was by the select board. I might be wrong.
And I don't even remember whether the first one had to go to town meeting. Did we approve that?
No, definitely didn't.
Because we had lots of discussions about it at town meeting many years ago, but I don't remember what the history was on that. So maybe we need to find the answer to that, is sit there and say, how do we address this? Do we want to have any capability? Because I look at it, whether it's a billboard advertising somebody's other businesses, or whether it's just a really big electronic sign advertising that business there, I look at them very similarly. The only difference being I've got the First Amendment issues of what type of content I can restrict it to if it's a billboard with other businesses. But I mean, from a aesthetic standpoint and what people see when they drive down Route 3 and driving through town, it's the same thing.
I guess one example I could use is maybe like, take for example, the movie theater or something like that, where they are now changing what their listings are for the movies, or they're advertising a new movie that just came out, or if there's like, I'm gonna throw another one out there, like a CVS where they have like they show something on sale right now. I mean, it could be it could be anything, but is advertising for something that's on the premise of that business. I don't know if those are the best examples, but that's what I was thinking off of the top of my head.
Go ahead, Bob.
One thing to keep in mind that I've mentioned in the past related to some of the other signs is just remember you're thinking about this as business signs because it's in business district or an industrial district. But if they go up, they can put any non-commercial message on the billboard or on the on-premise sign they want without town approval. Okay, and that could be a political message, it could be a very disturbing message, it could be all kinds of strange, it could be a wonderful message, it could be a hopeful message, it could be anything. And if it's non-commercial, once you allow a business commercial sign, that can be turned into a non-commercial sign without town approval.
That's kind of scary. I'm kind of leaning right now to saying no to any signs along Route 3. And the 3 that are there are there.
But we have to find out how they were there.
Yep. Colin, is that something you can find out for us, or?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
But I agree. I mean, I look at it and say we've got 3. I think we're trying to make it so that we don't, it's not arbitrary in that it's covered in the bylaws so that we have teeth to it, and we, you know, the ZBA has backing and support. But depending upon how the others were done, we might be restricted. So I personally don't want to have either one, but let's see how we can do that within the, you know, within the laws that are available to us.
Okay. All right, let's kind of postpone this to our September meeting then. We'll have the answers of how they got there. And then maybe that'll help us to figure out what we
Well,
want to do going forward. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah,
Yes.
the non-digital billboard, I don't have any recollection on that. That was, I believe, probably before my tenure. The town-owned site of the digital billboard, I remember that distinctly, and that came through as a, I believe it was through the selectmen, and that was using that as a source of revenue. And I remember that came through and that passed. The last digital one that hasn't been established yet or built yet, used that one as a basis to get their approval. So they became before zoning, like I said, we didn't have any regulations disproving it or approving it. They used the original signboard, electronic signboard, as their basis.
So we kind of set
Much
the
like the
precedent
special
almost.
permit for the American. Yeah, much like the special permit for the large American flag.
All right, well, let's put this in the back burner until we can get some answers from Colin. I guess the only other question that I would have, we have 2 electronic and 1 standing. If the standing one wanted to upgrade to electronic, how would we deal with that? That would be another question that we want to look at. If we're gonna have 3 that are in there that we're grandfathering, for example. then
Well,
we-
if they would try to do that on the one that was the non-digital, and we had a zoning bylaw preventing any further signboards, they would have to keep that as non-digital, I would imagine.
I agree. I'm not sure how that would all happen. So just throwing it out there as a possibility. All right, Bob, you had one final question for us, and that was the building codes.
That was the building code.
Which,
Yeah.
we will get an answer to that from somewhere else. Okay. Anything else, Bob, that you want to bring up that we should be looking
Let
at?
me just double check here and,
I kind of like the idea of putting a stop on any future signboards on that Route 3 corridor
Me
also.
too. Yep.
Um, it doesn't mean that we can't change in the future if something changes or whatever, but right now it would establish a precedent for zoning so that if someone was to come with any of those size lots or frontage, that we would say, no, it's not allowed. That would
Totally
give,
agree, Joe.
us a
Yeah.
little more.
I mean, once they see the next sign, the one that's gonna go up, I wouldn't want other businesses to all of a sudden see it as an opportunity. So I think it's best to nip it in the bud too.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it. I'm sitting there saying, geez, like we did with the original electronic sign to say we want to limit it for commercial uses. For municipal, we could allow it, but I don't want municipal billboards either. I look at it and say, for those types of items, there's a distinct use for it. I don't think it fits with where we want to go. We have them. We can't, there's no way to get rid of them right now, but I think we don't want to have any more. Let's just figure out how we can do that.
I think we're all in agreement with that. I think we don't want to expand that use anywhere. So I guess maybe, Bob, that's up to you to create that sort of language that says we're not going to allow it at all and figure out how we can defend it for what we already have there, whether it's grandfather or however that works.
yeah, good. I mean, that's what I was thinking. If you're gonna, prohibit it, then definitely to have specific language in the sign table, so it's clear. That way, that's the town's decision, and don't bother coming in for, whatever, a special permit or a select board permit or whatever.
Okay, and I think that's the way
I'll
we
draft
want-
something up. It just says a contingency depending on your final decision.
Okay, so I think that is the way we want to go, and if that is the way that we're all thinking about, do we really need Colin to research to figure out how those three got there, or do we just want to say no more?
I'm gonna have to do it anyway because the curiosity will get me.
I think, but I do
That's
think
fair.
we need that anyway,
Yeah.
just because we can't just say it's not allowed without understanding how they got
Yeah.
there in the first place, because then it opens us up.
Yeah, you definitely need to find that out. I mean, it's a question, as I mentioned earlier, are they a legal non-conforming use, or are they a use that was permitted for however, but not quote unquote legally? And that has implications down the road, because if they're not a legal non-conforming use, they can't change it to another legal non-conforming use. And and if it's not legal non-conforming and it deteriorates, the town could have them torn down because they don't have non-conforming protections. A lot of issues around legal non-conforming and not conforming.
Okay, good, good. All right, so Bob, anything else that we should discuss with you?
No, you'll have a, we're getting down to tiny changes now, but I'll have another draft for you in September, and then hopefully final decisions in September, and we can go from there.
So our September 10th meeting will be the next meeting. Anybody else have anything else that they want to add tonight before we adjourn?
Just from a logistics standpoint. So if our next meeting is September 10th, I mean, that's theoretically going to be the last. I forget when we're closing the warrant, Colin, but the question's going to be, is that our last meeting before the warrant? And are we going to have anything ready for the warrant, or are we teeing stuff up for spring?
That would certainly be the last regularly scheduled meeting before we close the warrant. Certainly if it was necessary and the group could do it, we could make a special meeting, but you'd want to do that before I think the warrant closes the first week in October. I'll confirm the date right now.
I know we published it. I just don't remember what it was. But
Well, if
that was
it's-
the only thing, Mr. Chair, is to understand what we wanted to accomplish before the fall town meeting and make sure that, this group has adequate time to pull something together that, planning and zoning and select board are all on board with.
Right, because we'll have to advertise this for the planning board to have it for 2 public meetings. So we need to make sure we've got this wrapped up enough to do that, which,
That might be tight. The warrant will close on October 7th. Certainly the planning board process is separate from that, but noticing, if the committee doesn't know until the end of its meeting on September 10th, if it's ready to move forward, that would be a very tight turnaround to then advertise public hearings with the planning board in sufficient time to be considered on the October 24th fall town meeting.
so
I'll-
do we have
okay.
to have, I'm sorry, Bob, go ahead.
I just wanted to be sure I heard that correctly, Colin. October 24th is the date of the fall town
22nd.
meeting?
22nd, sorry,
Second.
2 days off.
October 22nd. Okay, October 20.
So that would give at least 3 planning board meetings before. I think that we don't necessarily have to have the draft completed in order to bring it before the planning board. We could wrap the thing up in September. If we had one of our first planning board meeting in September, we can finish everything on September 10th in time for our second, which would be the final one, so that we could have both those public hearings in September and be ready for fall town meeting.
It's definitely doable.
Yeah, I think the key for us is going to be to identify what the material changes are, right? Because we're reorganizing some things to make it easier, like we did before, right? We're reformatting some things. They're not material changes, but there are some material changes in there, and we're going to have to make sure that we provide all of that info to everybody. I don't think there's a ton of material changes. I think we're closing a couple of loopholes or reformatting some things. So I think we could do it. My concern was more if we only have one more meeting with this group before we have to finalize everything. I don't know if that's enough. So I'm throwing out there.
Well, really, Bob, you think we can have everything done by September 10th? I mean, I
No,
certainly
well,
do.
you would not have a final draft on September 10th because you have to make decisions on September 10th. So it would be shortly thereafter, by maybe, I'm just looking at my calendar here. When would be the first planning board public meeting you'd want to hold in September?
So September
be the-
5th would be the first one. And then
September when?
5,
So you're gonna, that would just be a general agenda item, not a public hearing?
it would be a public hearing. But we could also let the public know that we're still finishing up on this one last issue. And then our next meeting would be on September the 19th. And the meeting following that would be October 3rd. And you said we were closing the warrant on October 7th.
Correct.
So actually, we could have September 19th and October 3rd for the public hearings for the planning board, which would allow us to have a final draft after our September 10th meeting. That would give you a week and a half almost, Bob, to get us the final draft.
Yeah, I could do that. That won't be hard.
Now, do we need to vote on that as a committee? That would be the final draft, or?
I think that as long as the committee's in consent, if you make decisions on the 10th and the committee agrees to the changes and Bob is simply incorporating the changes that you've suggested, I think that would suffice for what would move forward to the planning board. I would just want to double check. I don't think it would be a full. I think that we would need to, part of the notice requirement, I believe, for the planning board hearing, I think we have to have the actual language available ahead of the meeting, so we may want to set an internal deadline closer than, the 19th to make it available on the town's website. But certainly the 19th and the 3rd could work, and if there were last minute changes on the 3rd from the planning board, we could quickly make those changes before the select board closes the warrant on October 7th.
Okay,
Because that's the purpose of public hearings, right?
Yeah.
Is to make, you're saying this is what we're proposing. You don't want to have massive changes to it, but they could say, oh, we'd like to tweak this or tweak that based on information from the public hearing. The final stuff is what is goes under the warrant, and then it gets discussed on the floor at town meeting.
so what we're really saying here is the 19th and October 2nd for public hearings through the planning board certainly would work, and I would like to have this thing on the fall town meeting. I don't know about everybody else, but I want to show that we're at least doing something. And have something to go on to. Or do we want to push it off till spring? It seems if we could get it in for fall, I think that would be my choice.
Well, I think that will be determined at the September 10th meeting, wouldn't it?
Yes, except that we would have to advertise 2 weeks prior to the 19th.
Oh, right.
That we were going to be having the hearing. I mean, we could always say no if we aren't ready on the 10th, but
How far away are we, Mr. Chair, on the feeling comfortable that this is good, right? We've got the billboard question,
Yeah.
but are there that many items that we need to button up before we sit there and say this is good? Or
in my opinion, the only thing that we're really hanging out right now is the billboard. Unless anybody else has something else that's glaring that I'm missing. Hearing none.
But that should be an easy write-up, because we just said that we were gonna disallow any future, right? So that should be an easy write-up. Maybe can we just get that write-up sent out to the team members before then, so we can just vote and then report back to Colin or you, Chaz, with the wording before the meeting?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay,
Yeah, I will give you, like I have been doing, the next draft the week before. I give it to Colin, and with that prohibited language, and a couple of other tweaks here that like on the 2 flags instead of 1 flag, and then and if you give me the correct reference to the state building code, those tweaks, those easily will be ready before September 10th.
right, that would give us all a chance to review it. We could do that individually. We can get back to Colin to sort of organize the whole thing so that we're not doing anything outside of anything illegal as far as open meetings go. And then Colin, maybe you can let us know that we're all good or before September 10th. Because like I said, the key would be that if in fact we're all agreed by, say, the 1st of September, then we would be able to advertise and move forward with this for a fall town meeting. Sound like a plan?
yeah, I think we can review it internally, get back to Colin with any grave issues, right? We can tweak it. I think what we need to make sure is that all the material stuff is in there, that the language is there. We advertise it. We meet on September 10th. We finalize everything that we're good with. And then you've got your public hearings on the 19th. Is it the 19th and the 3rd, or the 19th? The 19th is a Thursday and the 2nd is a
3rd.
Wednesday.
Yeah,
I think it's the 3rd.
It's a 3rd, yeah, October
Yeah,
3rd.
so the 19th and then the 3rd, we have the public hearings, and the warrant closes on the 7th. Personally, I don't think there's going to be a ton of stuff on the fall warrant. So having this on there, I think is fine. I think it would be it's a good item to have on there. You're not going to have, you know, a slew of folks, but you know, maybe this will bring them out. I'm not sure.
Yep, okay, all right, well, let's proceed with that plan then. And with that, I
Bob's
guess,
got a question.
Yeah.
oh, Bob, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so my question is, you know, Eric, you were talking about having, I think it was you were, you know, something for the public to understand what's changing, what's not changing, what's the context here, and I can put a draft together. But this is, you know, this is a town effort.
Yes.
So it's not from me to
Nope.
the citizens of, so I wondered, I don't know if you have a format or a style, or if is this from the planning board or from the planning board and this committee, or how do you want to title it? I don't know, Colin, maybe you have some ideas. And you don't have to answer this question now, but if somebody could give me, email me if you have any ideas and sort of how you want this titled,
Mhm.
you know, that would simplify me trying to figure out. How
Yeah,
to-
I think it
how to
makes
work.
sense for it to come from the zoning review committee because you guys are the ones that did all the work. But Bob, happy to work with you on how we format that and then prepare for how we present it to town meeting and ultimately the planning board first.
Okay, all right, great, thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could. So we
Sure.
did something when we did each time, I think when we first did the zoning bylaws and changed the formatting, we did have a format. So Colin, I think in the pre-town meeting, we could leverage that format. I would think Bob could just focus in on the content side to say, these are the material changes. We can work on getting the format into that. And I think it did come from the zoning review committee to planning board, who then proposed the warrant articles to the select board, and then we were all on board with it. I think it's important that we're all pushing for this and we're on board with this change. It's not, you know, Bob, it's obviously not you, but it's all of us that are saying, yes, this needs to be done. And I think we can support that.
Yep.
But I know we have a good format on explaining to people, because we didn't have any problems, knock on wood, when we did the massive changes that were there in the formatting, because people understood, okay, this was here, we put it over here. These are the material changes that happened, because we did have to close some loopholes in there. And my guess is we don't have to do like we did in some of those others where we had them as separate warrant articles. My guess is we could do these as one warrant article, but let's see what the changes are, and we may change our mind.
Please don't change your mind. This sign bylaw, if anybody tries to pull it apart into pieces, that's just a disaster waiting to happen.
Totally agree, which is why sometimes we have them as separate things. Just say sign bylaws over here, because then if somebody finds something that they want to nitpick on, you know, one of the other changes,
Right,
it poo-poos everything. So
Right.
that's where we just sit there and say, but I'm hopeful that we can do it all in one warrant article. I don't see any reason why we couldn't.
Because in the past, we've really bit off an awful lot of different pieces of our bylaw. This time we're only doing one piece, so it should go smoothly.
Yep.
And of course, we had Eric Solano to present all that at town meeting before, and he did a great job with that. So we'll probably have to have one of us try and figure out who will spearhead that and present it to town meeting at that point, which we can figure out as we get closer. So, but let's. All right. So anybody else have anything else we want to do before we adjourn? All right, we have a plan. So I would look for a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Larry. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We'll see you all September the 10th. Thank you.